you did not go into the English language per se or the literature, though you are in teaching, but you went to a different subject, which is communication, that too.
Correct.
In a very technical education institute, which is IIT.
Correct.
How?
Let me first introduce you to the way that I differentiate between skills or domains of knowledge. There is a horizontal skill and then there are vertical skills. Technical domains often teach you vertical skills.
Okay.
Right? There is chemical engineering, there's mechanical engineering, there's law, there's criminal law, there is
A specific subject.
subjects. The way that I see a humanities education or a liberal arts education is that it gives you horizontal domains.
Different kind of communication, if yes, then what are different kind of communication or different types of communication?
We try to break communication into their utilitarian perspective and their theoretical perspective as well. We look at communication with our students in terms of how will these faculties of communication help them become better professionals and better people. So the way that we divide it is, we have descriptive writing, narrative writing, reflective writing, academic writing, argumentative writing, persuasive writing.
One more subject you teach is critical thinking.
Yes.
What is this critical thinking?
In the Bhagavad Gita, it's an analogy, right? God is speaking to us through Parth, through Arjun.
True.
Arjun is like a surrogate of humanity to whom God is speaking. After having delivered 18 adhyaya of the most divine knowledge that there could be, in the 18th adhyaya, Bhagavan Shri Krishna turns to Arjuna and says, I've given you the knowledge most profound. Now it is your duty to think upon it and do as you feel is right. Yathe chhasi tatha kuru. Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. Do what you feel is right. So even God is not saying, Bhai ne bola karne ka to karne ka. Right? You put your mind, I've given you that blessing for a reason. You think for yourself.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Between the Lines. Communication. We use this word day in, day out, communication. For most of us, communication is to write or speak in specific language. If someone is really good in English language, we say his communication skill is really good. Is this really communication? What is communication? Are there any different kinds of communication? Is communication really helpful in overall development? We need a lot of clarity on all this point. And to give us understanding on all this point, today we have very young, bright and intellectual guest, Nivid Desai. Nivid is Masters in English Literature. Currently he is working at IIT-Gandhinagar and teaches writing, communication and critical thinking to undergraduate, postgraduate and doctoral level. He is the youngest faculty member at IIT-Gandhinagar. He is the youngest subject matter expert at Swayamprabha, Ministry of Education, Government of India's Education Service. He contributes to academic policy, curriculum design, and research. He is a part of learner-designer community, which is a network of academicians across 35 countries. He has been regular participant at international conference hosted by IIT-Delhi, IIT-Bombay, Pilani, Christ University, Krea University, and Symbiosis University. He is also a speaker at MIT, NID, and other well-known universities. He holds certification in rhetoric, writing, and communication from Harvard X and journalism from University of Pennsylvania. He has translated English edition of Gujarati bestseller Morning Mantra, written by very well-known RJ Dhwanit. So let's go meet Nivid and build our understanding on communication. Nivid, welcome to Between the Lines.
Thank you so much, Dhwani bhai. Thank you for having me.
You are the youngest faculty member at IIT. And what a coincidence, you are the youngest guest at Between the Lines till now.
That is a pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm really keen to discuss with you some of the points, because what I feel is that when we talk to younger generation is a Google for us, Many times we want some information, we go to Google, but rather we choose to go to younger generation to get more information. So that's why I'm really, looking forward to have insightful discussion with you, considering you are a part of a younger generation. Now, Nivid, when we talk about our career and our position wherever we are today or wherever we'll be in the future, that starts with the upbringing.
I agree.
And our position or whatever we do in professional life, that really connects with the upbringing.
I agree.
So I'm always interested in understanding about the upbringing of the people. And so as I would like to know, how was your upbringing?
Thank you for giving me that opportunity to first acknowledge the origins of my journey. People often believe this is a Socratic idea that the unexamined life is not worth living. So when I look back at the origins of my journey and I try to examine the origin of that journey, my family and my upbringing has played the most pivotal role in defining the course of that entire journey. I was privileged to be born and raised by a family of ideas. And every member of my family, both my parents, my grandparents, and the extended family as well, on both sides, everybody has had some or the other spirit of cultivating, gaining, and sharing knowledge. My mother's a teacher, my father is a banker, but I've seen my father as well waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning and teaching neighborhood kids for free.
Okay.
And just dispensing the kind of knowledge that he has. So I had that privilege of growing up in a household that prized and prioritized knowledge and creativity. I also had the privilege of growing up with my grandparents. My grandfather served in the government for most of his life. And he cultivated a reading habit where not just in me, not just in my family, but also amongst his colleagues, where he would run a community library inside his office. I haven't had the privilege of knowing my grandmother. We sadly lost her when I was very young. But I've recently had the privilege of rediscovering her diaries. And reading those diaries, I find out why people often tell me that she would be proud of the kind of progress that I have made in my life. Because I see the ideas that I continue to aspire for reflected in the kind of words that she wrote in her diary. So I've had the privilege of growing up in a house of ideas, in a family of ideas, where the creative expression, my own opinions, my own worldview has always had some or the other importance in all conversations throughout my formative years. So all of the credit of what I am or what I continue to be each day goes to the kind of upbringing that my family has provided me.
Interesting, Nivid. Whenever we talk about upbringing, a lot of people come with their story of having struggle, tough time. But you have come up with a very different thought process of upbringing, that you are born and brought up in a family of having ideas. And what I feel is that your family member did not preach you, but rather they teach you by their action. That's what I understood from your
And they
opinion.
continue to do so. They continue to do so. Every day, I see some or the other member of my family reading, right? I see them having a constructive conversation on things that matter in our lives, in our family, in the world. So they continue to teach me by example, as they've done so all their lives.
Amazing. We are a democratic country, but I will say that you are born and brought up in a democratic family.
I agree.
That's what
And
is visible in your
that has
appearance.
been one of the most profound privileges of my life.
Amazing, amazing. Now, when we talk about a boy, the label which is normally given to boy by families, either engineer, doctor. But I'm a little bit interested in knowing why arts, why English literature.
Okay. I agree with you that much of the conventional image of having a male child is that they would go into technical domains, they would go into medical domains. And that is the structure that our society has set up for children of certain upbringing or children of certain strata. I was recently telling a colleague of mine that I've always been somebody who thinks with words more than numbers. I've recently learning how to think with numbers, but my literacy has always been better than my numeracy. And if that is the worldview with which I've grown up, it only took a natural progression of the kind of atmosphere that I grew up in to realize that along the lines of maybe age 13 to 14 that I was much more interested in telling stories than calculations.
Okay.
And that was where the leap of faith came in. And again, due credit to my family, where they invested that faith in me, they invested that belief in me that the kind of stream that I would choose or the kind of subjects that I would choose in studying did not have a bearing on the kind of career that I would lead. They would not end up harming it, at least. So that belief was there from the beginning, that the insistence on excellence, the insistence on integrity, of sincerity, has always been there regardless of which subject you are studying. So even if I was studying arts, I was equally sincere, I was equally invested, I was equally alert and aware of what I was studying as somebody who would be studying in the technical domains maybe. I've never been reared up to render it anywhere insincere or anywhere lesser important than the kind of technical domains. So that's where arts came to be. Neither of my parents are arts graduates, but both of them have an artistic bent of mind, right? My father loves music. My father loves poetry. My mother recently graduated with a master's. She's more than 50 years old. She recently graduated with a master's in arts in Gujarati literature. Just to rediscover the passion of literature. So both of them, despite not being art students, technically speaking, they both have a certain artistic bent of mind. Stephen Pinker, the Harvard neurologist, has this quote called, nature gives the knobs, but nurture turns them.
Wow, amazing thought.
So that is where my nurture came into being, where arts was a temperament which was invested in me, which was cultivated in me since my childhood, and it eventually found its form within academia. Why English is a good question, because I spent most of my primary education, secondary education in Gujarati. English came to be a language of communication first and foremost. I also was made to realize by my teachers, by my family, that this was the language, the lingua franca, as they say, the link language across the world. I was, of course, rather scared since the beginning because I grew up in a Gujarati household. I studied in Gujarati. I love Gujarati as a language, as my culture, as my way of thinking. But English tended to be an academic curiosity altogether, right? Because it's a very strange language. It's a funny language, as the saying goes. And I also wanted to find out what kind of stories is the world presenting to me. And, for better or for worse, much of the translated literature also happens to be in English. So that's where the curiosity for English came to be. And it was also just the sheer passion of learning a new language, which is where I picked up arts and then English as the afterthought.
Great. I think I feel that you are a rarest of rare individual who did not have any confusion while, deciding, thinking about their career path. So that's beauty of your, journey till now. So now coming to one more point that once, let's say if I am a literature student, I've done masters, then the next step is either I go for PhD and then the next step in the career is always in the teaching. Maybe I become a professor of English literature. But for you, you did not go into the English language per se or the literature, though you are in teaching, but you went to a different subject, which is communication, that too.
Correct.
In a very technical education institute, which is IIT.
Correct.
How?
Let me first introduce you to the way that I differentiate between skills or domains of knowledge. There is a horizontal skill and then there are vertical skills. Technical domains often teach you vertical skills, right? there is chemical engineering, there's mechanical engineering, there's law, there's criminal law, there is
A specific subject.
specific
Yeah.
subjects. The way that I see a humanities education or a liberal arts education is that it gives you horizontal domains where it teaches you critical thinking, it teaches you communication, it teaches you behavioral understanding, right? Now, the way that I saw my education in literature for about 5 years with bachelor's and master's is that it taught me countless horizontal domains. It taught me how to notice the intricacies of the world around me. It taught me how to think about logic. It taught me how to think about narratives. It taught me how to think about the psychological domain of being human. And believe it or not, there are no domains of knowledge where any of these factors are not applicable. Even if you take something as objective as mathematics, its application will have some or the other horizontal domains being applied to it. So the way that I saw my role as an educator coming out of a master's program, coming out of grad school in literature, was that I wanted to see just how far I can take my horizontal domain knowledge,
Amazing.
which is where I looked at communication, which is where I looked at storytelling, narrative, critical thinking, logic, all of that playing a significant role in refining the clarity of thinking among technologists, among people who shape the future as we live it. Which is where I thought that, okay, let me see where my education in critical thinking, my education in literature finds home somewhere or the other amongst people who are trained to think in a fundamentally opposite direction than me. One of my family members, when I was talking to him, my uncle, he taught me about how my students and I are fundamentally trained in two different directions. My students are trained in problem solving, while I am trained in problematizing. So my interaction with them is one of complementary exchange of knowledge, where they teach me the tools to solve the problems, and while I try to make them more aware about which problems are worth solving. So that is the kind of exchange that I envision in all of my classrooms, and which is why I find that my faculties of knowledge, my faculties of training, my skills find a very unique kind of utility at a tech institute. And not just at a tech institute. Everywhere that I've had the privilege of speaking as a guest lecturer or as an invited speaker, I've always found that these horizontal domains of knowledge, they always find some or the other applicability. Be it in pure sciences, be it in law, be it in business
interconnected.
administration, be it in design, they're all interconnected. And knowing about horizontal domains actually lets you connect those dots very easily. They let you see how disciplines talk to each other. They teach you about how boundaries of subjects really don't matter. They teach you how a physicist can talk to a psychologist, and both of them can be better off as part of that conversation. That is what fascinates me. So that's why I feel like I'm far more suited in that kind of a role that helps me bridge conversations between different disciplines
Very
and
interesting.
bring new knowledge.
Very interesting. No surprise that you have been brought up in families of ideas.
Yeah.
In a initial few minutes, you have already given me a lot of ideas. Now, communication. This is what this one word is always a challenge. Is something a question mark. So, as you are a champion of this subject, we want to know what is communication.
Okay. Communication is fundamentally the exchange of ideas. In very technical domain, communication at least has two parties, the sender and the receiver. In even more technical domain, they're called the encoder and the decoder, right? Somebody who encodes a message and somebody who decodes the message. Now, you would think by conventional wisdom that communication is interlinked with language. It is to an extent, but they are not one and the same. People who don't know language, babies, infants, still communicate. They have a very unitary way of communication, sure, but they do communicate. Animals communicate, right? The nature communicates.
People who can't speak.
People who can't speak communicate. Physically incapable people, differently abled people, they communicate, right? And even when nature communicates with us, we have different ways of interpreting nature's messages. Sometimes we take it on face value, sometimes we create stories out of it. Right? Sometimes we create stories about the summer, we create stories about the winter. The ancient Egyptian civilization made stories about the sun god because they did not know that sun was a star at the center of our solar system. So the way that communication takes place is that there is a message, there is an encoder that encodes the message, and through a medium sends across to the decoder, sends across to the listener, the receiver, who then decodes that message. The point of communication is to ensure that the encoder and the decoder understand the message in its same form. Now, it is not necessary that this is going to be the case at all times, right? There will always be miscommunication. There will always be difficulties of interpretation. However, that is what makes us human. My engineering students often ask me, so what to do about miscommunication as a problem? I said, miscommunication is not a problem, it's a condition. Right? You have fundamentally misdiagnosed miscommunication as a problem. It's not something to be solved. It is something to be lived with. It is something to be mitigated. You can try to lessen it, sure, but treat it as a human uniqueness, treat it as a human frailty. That is something worth cherishing. Because if I say exactly what you mean, if I say exactly what you want to listen and you understand exactly what I've said, where is poetry? Where is literature? Where is storytelling? Because then there are no interpretations, there are no metaphors, there are no images. So communication is fundamentally encoding and decoding through a medium. That is my understanding.
So in a very simple language, it's about expressing in a different medium.
Exactly.
Different medium.
Exactly.
I'm sure you have given a very rich and a different explanation about communication. But are there different kind of communication? If yes, then what are different kind of communication or different types of communication?
We try to break communication into their utilitarian perspective and their theoretical perspective as well. We look at communication with our students in terms of how will these faculties of communication help them become better professionals and better people. So the way that we divide it is, we have descriptive writing, narrative writing, reflective writing, academic writing, argumentative writing, persuasive writing. All these are different domains that can help them become better technical communicators as well as creative communicators. So it's a progression, right? You first learn descriptive writing as a pure skill of noticing the world around you. We frankly, especially people in my generation, present company included, me also, we have slightly lost that edge of just paying attention to the world around us. So with descriptive writing, we make it an insistent remark that just ground yourself in your senses. Do you even realize that you have 5 senses, right? Can you notice the color? Can you notice texture? Can you notice taste? Can you notice smell? And write about that. Put that into words. Susan Sontag has this beautiful quote about how writing is paying attention to what you pay attention to. So it is about directing and channeling your attention in a way which is anchoring it in the world around you. So that's where descriptive comes in. Then there is narrative, where you start telling stories. Once you've learned how to notice the world around you, you start telling stories. Then there is reflective, when you start talking about your own emotions and experiences. You talk about what you lived through in the past and what you are living right now and what you look forward to in future. Once we have done all of this in one semester, we take a break and then we move towards academic communication, which is just laying down an argument, looking for evidence, proving a claim. Then we move on to argumentative communication, which doesn't mean screaming on a TV debate at 9:30 p.m., but just building a strong argument. If you have something to say, if you have a position to stand on, putting your point forward in a convincing manner. And once convincing comes in, that's where persuasion arises. That you need to make sure that you know strategies that can help communicate your point to the other person in a way that they are more likely to believe what you have to say.
But in a simple language, if I say there are two communication, which is normally we say verbal, non-verbal.
Verbal and non-verbal.
So
Correct.
If I say non-verbal is my body language, so my body language also communicates something. My
I agree.
facial expression also communicates something.
I agree.
And one thing I just want to check that. Many times we say that your communication is not good. You are not good in listening. But I feel listening is something we just get some words in through our ears. I feel that rather than listening, understanding, whatever you are telling me, if it goes to my ear, that means I'm listening. But it goes through my heart and I catch that essence of that your words. That means understanding. So do you feel that the other person, the listening or understanding is also one of the art of communication?
100%. Listening skills are very underrated. We usually think of communication as an art of speaking or expressing. Communication is as much about the receiver as it is about the sender. Because if there is no receiver who is capable of receiving, decoding, and understanding the message, then there is no point of there being a sender and then encoding it in as many nuanced and intricate ways as possible. Having said that, I often also look at people who are very impatient listeners. Let me tell you what I mean by that. People who are just waiting for their turn to speak next. Right? People who are just biding time. Let this person, I will give them the dignity of completing their point. But as soon as they complete their point, I'll start speaking. So there are 3 degrees through which I see this. First, you are listening to react. Right? Frankly, that is not even qualified as listening.
Yes.
You are just waiting for your turn.
Yes.
Then you are listening to respond. Where you are giving them the dignity of completing their point, maybe giving them consideration and understanding what they are going through. And then responding to exactly what they have said. Right? And the third is listening to understand. Where you are okay if you don't have anything to say. You let the person speak their heart and you let silence be there. Right? The wisdom lies in the gap between the words. And there is, I recently came across this joke. A wise man once said nothing.
Oh, wonderful.
So
one line, a big message.
Yes.
Now you have talked about persuasive communication. Can you give me one example to understand more about this level of communication?
Persuasion is, believe it or not, all around us. Everybody is trying to sell us something. Everybody is trying to convince us about something. Marketing is all about it. Politics is all about it. Negotiation is all about it. Your business pitches are all about it. Where you are trying to communicate to somebody in a way that they will be convinced. Persuasive communication is extremely important to understand because it's both, to paraphrase that Spider-Man quote, Uncle Ben Parker, it is both a great power and a great responsibility. Once I teach persuasion to my students, I often tell them that I've given you a very dangerous tool. Please be careful. Please exercise your conscience in a way that you don't abuse this to exploit people around you. I'll give you some examples. The way that politics works is a political party or a politician or a leader trying to convince you about a vision. Could be about policy, could be about society, could be about the country at large, could be about the world, could be about economy, education, finances. All of these are persuasive messages. Then there are brands who are trying to sell you an idea in the guise of a product or a product in the guise of an idea, right? Then there are business pitches in which they are trying to project the numbers which a certain business entity would do in future, and accordingly a certain investor should invest a certain amount of money. There are many TV shows nowadays which portray this kind of process as well. It's all around us. The kind of awareness that we must practice ensures that we don't fall prey to persuasion when we don't want it to be. Because otherwise it is extremely easy to be swayed by charisma, to be swayed by strategies and rhetorics and different tools that people can use within language to communicate and persuade somebody.
So if I understand if correctly, persuasion is more about talking amicably to reach to some common conclusion.
Correct. And just to add just one last point of nuance when it comes to persuasion, most of persuasive messages in this world across human history are coded to go back to the technicality of communication, are encoded in just in a binary in two forms. If you do X, Y will happen, and if you don't do X, Y will happen.
Yeah, amazing. Wow.
This is the framework of persuasion that works across the board. Whenever you see these kinds of design of communication coming your way, when somebody is trying to sell you a possibility, positive or negative, be aware of what you are subscribing to and how you are moving forward.
Great, great. One more subject you teach is critical thinking.
Yes.
What is this critical thinking?
Critical thinking is one of the core skills, core life skills, as even designated by the World Health Organization. The 10 most desirable life skills in the 21st century. Critical thinking is an ability to look at different aspects of circumstance, of things, of ideas, of events, and trying to look at it from as much an objective point as possible and analyzing it to reach a conclusion. It is also fairly structured. It's not something which is just intuitive. To many people, critical thinking comes intuitively, which is good for them. But for somebody who wants to learn critical thinking, they can do it with structures. Let me give you an example. One of the earliest examples, documented examples of critical thinking, at least in Western philosophy, is through Aristotle, where he says that there is a 5W and 1H structure, where you ask questions about anything that comes your way.
Why,
any
or
such.
what?
Exactly. Who, why, what, when, where, and how.
How?
So if you ask these many questions, you will break it down to its essentials and then try to make a judgment based on the information that you found.
Okay.
And I will also emphasize why critical thinking is important. Dhanibhai, we come from a culture that has always prized critical thinking. I'll give you an example. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's an analogy, right? God is speaking to us through Parth, through Arjun.
True.
Arjun is like a surrogate of humanity to whom God is speaking. After having delivered 18 adhyaya of the most divine knowledge that there could be, in the 18th adhyaya, Bhagavan Shri Krishna turns to Arjuna and says, I have given you the knowledge most profound. Now it is your duty to think upon it and do as you feel is right. Yathechhasi tatha kuru. Yatha ichhasi tatha kuru. Do what you feel is right. So even God is not saying, Bhai ne bola karne ka to karne ka. Right? You put your mind, I've given you that blessing for a reason. You think for yourself and you do as you feel is right. So we come from a tradition where even God can't dictate us what is the right or wrong thing to do. Even God gives us that liberty.
Wow.
Bhagavan Shri Krishna gives us that liberty. Yathechhasi tatha kuru. So in fact, it is a civilizational responsibility for all of us to be better critical thinkers. We come from a tradition of Vad, right? Where there are no commandments, there are no orders, divinely ordained things. We have to talk to people. We have to ask questions. We have to break down ideas to its principles and then subscribe to them or not subscribe to them based on our own free will.
You have given a very, very easy definition of critical thinking through Bhagavad Gita. And I'm sure, so that means we should think for a while before we speak.
I
That's what
agree.
critical thinking.
I agree.
You are a part of education system and you also contribute in designing academic policies. One thing I want to know that what change you want to see or you can do in education system where students can groom during their academic career.
Correct. I've had the privilege of designing policy at my alma mater at St. Xavier's College. And one thing that I always insist on whenever conversations about policy or conversations about pedagogy arises, most of our education system at present is very instructor-centric, meaning the classrooms are designed in such a way where there is an instructor, there is a group of students, and the instructor is preaching to the students.
And that instructions are also very well designed and defined.
Exactly. There is no scope for molding it according to the student's curiosity. So my 2 cents as far as reforming education in its most basic teacher and student relationship way is that the teacher has to make the student curious first about what they are teaching,
Okay.
and then respond to that curiosity in order to cement that learning permanently. If this is taken care of, then teaching or education will shift from being instructor centric to learner centric. And that's where I see a lot of Indian education also going, especially with the National Education Policy 2020, where the learner-centric nature of classrooms is emphasized, where skill development is emphasized, application of those skills through apprenticeships, through internships, through practical implementation of the knowledge that they are gaining is emphasized.
That's very practical, suggestion you have given. And if I have to, take one example from sports, I what I've learned from the sports is we talk about coach and the role of coach. So what it is said that role of coach is not to tell that what you have to do or do this. Rather, he will ask a question to help you to find answer yourself, and that's what you are telling about, which is quite practical. And it's a beautiful suggestion by you. Now, if I see your profession, if I to describe in one word, you are a teacher.
Exactly.
I want to know what is the role of teacher.
And that's a beautiful question, because it is a question I ask myself every day in order to make sure that I'm being responsible towards the profession that I practice. It is a profession of responsibility. So one has to have a clear direction of where to guide their efforts. I would like to respond to you with a story. I told this to a friend of mine who raised a very similar question. About how do you see your role inside a system? How do you see your role inside an institution? And I told her a story from the Ramayana. Now, there are multiple versions of the Ramayana, as we know, across India and across history. And many stories change across the Ramayana and their retellings. One story remains constant. Hanumanji, when he was a child, was a very mischievous kid and thought that the sun is a large fruit. I want to eat that fruit. I'm hungry. So he made that huge leap and came very close to eating the sun. And the gods became very perplexed. So they struck down Hanumanji, fell on the ground, hurt his chin. That's how we know him as Hanuman from Maruti. And then eventually, his father, Pavandev, Vayudev, comes to rescue and he pleads to the gods, saying, "It's a little child, please let him go." And the gods say, "Okay, we are not going to take away all his might and abilities and powers, which was the previous threat. Now we are going to lighten the sentence, so to say. Now the sentence is that at the moment when Hanumanji's powers are most required, he will forget all his powers. He will need to be reminded by somebody. And once he is reminded of who he is, he will regain his powers and he will be able to exercise those powers to his full might." So, cut to Rameshwaram, where Prabhu Shri Ram has realized that Sita Ma is in Lanka and he needs to check if she's all right. And of course, whom does he choose? He chooses his lieutenant. He chooses Hanumanji. That you have to go across the sea, you have to go to Sri Lanka, and you have to understand what Sita Ma's condition is. You have to ensure, you have to carry my ring, right? Prabhu Mudrika Meli Mukhmahi. You have to carry my ring and leap across the ocean to Lanka. Be my messenger to Sita. Hanumanji asks, "How? I am just an ordinary being. How will I leap across the ocean to reach Lanka?" And that is when Jamvan steps in. Jamvan is a wise bear. Jamvan steps in. And Jamvan gives this sermon. to Hanuman, to remind him of who he is, of what capabilities he holds, of what kind of a divine being he is. And listening to those stories about himself from Jamvan, Hanumanji regains those powers, realizes his full potential, and then the Sundarkand happens as we know it. I see the role of a teacher as the role of Jamvan, where you realize that your students are capable of immense potential. They themselves may not realize it. They themselves may not know how much they know. But you have to make them realize just what potential beings they are. You have to make them realize the depth of their knowledge. You have to help them achieve clarity about all the things that they already know. You have to give them frameworks. You have to give them mental models that helps them access the world that they will live in future. You don't teach them anything new, that's fine. Just make them realize how much they already know, how much they pick up from the world around them, how much of a lived experience their life has already been. And that's where I see the role of Jamvan. You just have to keep reminding your students of the immense potential that they hold within them. Thank you.
I think
that's very kind.
It's completely spiritual definition of teacher. And I always say that objective of between the lines is to get the wisdom. And I really feel that today my objective is fulfilled.
I'm not sure if I'll call this wisdom, that's too heavy a word, but this is something that I aspire to live every day. This is the standard that I like to hold myself up to, which is why I try my best not to waver from it.
I think you have given, in short, you have said that the role of teacher is not only responsible but accountable.
Of course.
Beautiful definition. Let's say if you are made an education minister, what change you would like to bring?
Again, a huge responsibility, both responsible and accountable. But there are some things about the present educational paradigm which perplex me. So here are a few things that I would like to shake up a little bit. I would like to first talk about the ideal scenario where if given resources of my will and circumstances of my will, where can the education system go? So I would like to divide that into staffing, training, and infrastructure. Staffing, first of all, make sure that people with relevant skills are hired and kept accountable for the kind of performance that they have. And I'm not just talking about teachers. When you think of an educational institution, you might often think about a school or a university. But within those schools and universities, you would see a lot of news reports coming on about teachers doing jobs which are not necessarily teaching, right? They are being asked to do a lot of clerical jobs, a lot of official responsibilities, surveys, census, elections, SIR recently, where even if they want to teach, the system doesn't allow them to. So, and that is because of a dearth of staffing. So, staff institutions in a way which lets teachers teach, first of all. Now that the teachers are teaching, you make sure that the incentives are aligned in a way which makes the teachers accountable for their performance. So, train them in a way that keeps them updated about the modern teaching and pedagogical practices so that they can deliver the best education that they are held responsible for. And then third comes infrastructure. And by infrastructure, I also don't necessarily mean buildings and grounds and sports facilities. Of course, those are important. I also mean the policy infrastructure, where, again, incentives are aligned and hierarchy is aligned in a way which does not centralize power, but decentralizes education in a way that the end-line workers, the teachers and the students, have the autonomy of carrying out education in a way which they deem fit. I'm not talking about deciding curriculum for themselves. Of course, that can be somewhat uniform. it has to be updated, but it can be uniform, because otherwise, how will there be testing measures? There are practical problems that come up. But as far as how to teach is concerned, that should not be dictated. That should not be a primitive understanding of instruction-centric teaching, as I mentioned earlier. So, in a line, if I can summarize the stance on policy, it would be somewhere along the lines of autonomy of process, but accountability of outcome. Autonomy of process meaning there is a process. It's not anarchy, right? There is a process. You adhere to the process, but in an autonomous manner. And at all fronts, not just teachers, administrators, clerks, everybody who holds up the education system as it is. So autonomy of process, but accountability of outcome. I'll take 2 more minutes to talk about accountability. There is a severe lack of data when it comes to assessing the state of education in India. So if anybody is interested, please check out the ASER reports that come out every year, the annual state of education reports in India. And they tell you the kind of literacy and numeracy standards that we are achieving or not achieving. So there's a severe dearth of data, and based on that data, it actually helps make policy. It actually helps fulfill staffing requirements and training requirements. So again, if given authority, I'd first and foremost make sure that we have data at hand. We have assessment at hand. The OECD countries have the PISA framework, which is a program for international student assessment, PISA, P-I-S-A. India is a partner country to OECD, but we don't participate in PISA, which is why we don't know whether our students are competing alongside international standards or not. We should not be embarrassed about the outcomes. We should be accountable to our outcomes. So data is a severe gap to fill. And at last, if leadership is not present in the public, the whole perception of education, the whole perception of academia, the whole perception of school teaching also goes for a toss. So leadership has to be public. Leadership has to be out in the public, speaking about education, speaking about the dynamic changes within education, and making sure that the electorate, the people who are electing those leaders in positions, also know the kind of steps that the government is taking to make sure that the education is state of the art. So as a minister, I would much rather be a public intellectual, right? Somebody who speaks openly about the innovations within education. That's a very far-reaching imagination, but
very innovative thought you have given about the education system, and I'm sure again it is not impossible. Yes, tough, but it is not impossible to bring such thought and implement. I think.
We can at least start somewhere.
Sure.
We can at least start with measurement and autonomy. Those are 2 things that I would like to.
Artificial intelligence, AI, has become a buzzword.
Sure.
Everybody, starting from school kid to the professionals, they talk about AI. They are very curious about AI, and they see a magical outcome out of AI. Now, when we talk about communication, thinking and writing are 2 critical parameters of communication.
I agree.
How do you see writing and thinking in the age of AI?
It's a subject very close to my heart because it's also posing severe existential questions. Questions that did not exist previously are now questions that we have to deliberate with every day. Thinking and writing are fundamentally human exercises. They make us who we are. They keep us who we are. AI, let me take a moment to explain how it works also. It predicts the next most likely word, statistically likely word, in response to the query that the user has put in, right? So if you put in a query about generate a 100-word essay on this, it'll generate the most statistically likely outcome based on the data that it is trained on, which by definition means that there is no original output that AI can do. Having said that, it can be a great tool to augment thinking and augment writing. If you are somebody who wants to upskill, you can start learning how to think critically with the help of AI. You don't let the AI think. You don't output thinking. You don't outsource thinking. You don't outsource writing. You keep those faculties with yourself. However, if you want to refine it, these tools can do a reasonably decent job to help you become better at it. However, there is a lovely quote that Balaji Srinivasan once wrote about in his blog. AI is not end to end, it's middle to middle.
Wow.
Right? So end to end is human.
Yes.
Middle to middle, as far as the procedure is concerned, that can be augmented by AI. It'll be an interesting experiment for anybody who wants to take it up further, and models are still improving. We'll have to wait and watch where this goes. But no matter where it goes, we'll have to put our foot down somewhere and make sure that we retain what makes us human, which is our imperfections, which is our limitations in understanding, and which is our creative expression of thought and emotion.
Very nice. So I'm sure that, rather, what you have said is that we should keep on thinking, writing, let AI do its own job.
We can't take our creativity for granted anymore.
True.
That is one thing which it has compelled us to do. We have to be more and more intentional about what we think and how we think and why we think. These fundamental principles of being human, we can't take them for granted anymore. We'll have to be more intentional and utilize them in our lives a little more consciously.
Wow. I think great thought about writing and thinking in the age of AI. Where would you like to see yourself after 5 years, 10 years down the line?
I'd definitely be teaching, because it fundamentally fulfills my soul. And working in education has spoilt me in some ways, where I see impact happening every day. I see learners gaining new knowledge, learners understanding the world a little better and contributing to it, helping them, being a catalyst in their process, has spoiled me in a way which gives me this satisfaction of impact, the satisfaction of purpose, day in and day out. I would just like to make sure that my impact reaches to the level of curriculum design, of policy design, if it can help, and making sure that I'm still preparing myself for it. Right? I have a 15-year-old plan where I want to learn what goes into building good institutions. I want to learn what goes into building good systems, to make sure that by the time that I'm around 40-ish years old, I have at least a firm grasp on, if I'm given responsibility, the kind of responsibility that we discussed, I don't end up making false promises, that I know what I'm talking about. I know what systems to put in place. I know what institutions to build. And I am, again, incredibly privileged to be experimenting with these ideas in reputable spaces, in spaces that hold me accountable, where I see the kind of result that is, in fact, one of the continuing strands of my research, where I practice something in my class and write a paper about it. And I bring it to conferences where there are education experts who then critique those ideas. So I have that pipeline of feedback, which I want to just keep working on in future, and making sure that through education, we can form the next generation into a more conscientious generation. And of course, successive generations as well. Barack Obama once said that we have to bend history in a better direction. So that's, again, a tall order. But it's a standard that I want to hold myself up to.
I'm really happy that I've got a very crisp and clear answer. That means you have a beautiful clarity about your next future. Because when we ask somebody, or when we ask anyone, they would say either want to be CEO or want to be on so-and-so position. So they will talk about position or about their materialistic objective. But you have said that your future, what you want to see is what you want to do.
Correct.
What you want to contribute.
Correct. So I've always been brought up with these ideas around my family, where your ambitions should not frame themselves in I want to be. They should be framed in I want to do, as you mentioned.
Wow.
And which is what frees you from this arbitrary pressure of goals.
Yeah.
You have processes,
Very nice.
right? You have processes that you are trying to refine for the rest of your life, and making sure that those processes generate outcomes from time to time that you are held accountable for.
I think you have second my two thought. One is process is more important than result.
Correct.
And journey is more important than destination.
I completely agree.
I always end up the podcast with the guest with this question or this clarity which I seek from the guest, that your message for the students.
Don't take a few things for granted. I'll tell you what those things are. First of all, don't take your curiosity for granted, because you have a wealth of knowledge that you already have, and then you also have a wealth of knowledge that you willingly want to acquire. Please do something about your attention, because that is something that I see my generation and my successive generations struggle with every day. Reclaim your attention. Make sure that factors around you are not manipulating you to invest attention in ways that are wasteful. Distractions, right? And frankly enough, Dhoni, they don't even look like distractions. You can watch 5 productivity videos on YouTube and call it a day. But that's not productive by itself, right? So it's a little more nuanced than distraction also. It is distraction disguised as productivity.
True.
Right? So that's not something. If you ask students right now, if you ask young people right now, what are their hobbies? And many of them would just give you a buffet platter of content consumption as a hobby. So please take ownership of your attention back. You had it somewhere along the lines. All of us, I'm just as much complacent in this. We have all lost it somewhere along the lines. It's time that we reclaim our attention. Lastly, differentiate between being a student and being a learner. You don't stop learning once you graduate from an institution. Learn how to learn.
Oh, amazing.
Learning how to learn is a life skill which will have significant outcomes in future. You will pick up new skills, you will pick up new knowledge, and you will create an entire narrative of knowledge in your mind, which will be your own unique set of principles that you live with. So don't stop being a learner once you stop being a student. Acquire new knowledge, add that to your bank of knowledge, and create an entire network, which is where wisdom comes from, just like you mentioned, right? Create an entire network of knowledge that is unique to your own lived experiences and your own learned experiences. So curiosity, attention, and learning how to learn.
Wow. I think your message quite resonate with the great Sachin Tendulkar. He gave two beautiful, word of wisdom to while he was addressing to young cricketers and younger generation. First, that during your journey or during your work or while you play, you will come across a lot of distraction, but don't get distracted. And second thing he said, this is a beautiful statement he gave to the younger crowd, that when you go in the morning, go with some expectation, but when you return with some experience.
Wonderful.
I think that's
Wonderful.
what you say, that don't get distracted, be attentive, and keep on learning,
I think there was a wonderful Sanskrit story that I learned when I was in school. And the essence of that story is that the one who sleeps, their fortune keeps sleeping. The one who sits, their fortune keeps sitting. The one who stands, their fortune keeps standing. But the one who walks, their fortune keeps walking. So, charati charato bhagah, that is what the story said. Charai veti, keep on walking, keep on walking. So, if you subscribe to that principle, if you subscribe to that philosophy of life, it keeps you curious, right? It keeps you learning all through life. So, charai veti, keep on walking, keep on walking.
Nivid, I think you have given a wonderful thought. Your thought process has not enriched only me, but I'm sure our audience will get enriched.
And I've learned just as much from you. Thank you so much for your insightful questions. I really appreciate it.
Nivid, I think the meaning of your name, which comes from Vedas, you once told me that Veda has essence of a poem, or there are certain poems which are known as Nivid. So I want to say that your life, your thought process is not less than any poem.
That is very
And,
kind of you.
and
Thank you.
you have lived up to your name as of now, and I'm sure you will be living up to your name, because whatever you have said or whatever you say, we feel just like a poem. So
That is very kind
thank
of
you
you.
for sparing your time and enriching us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
That was Nivid Desai. As his name says, it's a poem of Vedas. And that's what we experience by way of his thought and the way he has presented his thought. We feel that it's like a poem. Lot of learning out of this session. And if I have to summarize few, the first learning is for parents. As he said, that he has been brought up in the family of ideas, and we see the result, the kind of Nivid, the kind of character he is. So one learning for not only parents, for all of us. Let us bring the ideas in the family. Let us bring the idea in the upbringing. Let us spread ideas, because at the end of the idea, it creates a character. So this is the first and beautiful learning, that let us spread ideas. Second, he said about the students, the first is be attentive, because in the world of social media, we are very easily get distracted. So be attentive, have focus. Second, don't get distracted. The moment you get distracted, you are out of your work, your study, and your natural life. And third, he talked about teaching or teacher. Generate curiosity. Be you are, whatever you are. You are a manager, you are a boss, CEO, parent, friend, brother, sister. Give the curiosity. Give your experience, so that the other person can learn. Give them the nature of getting a lot of curiosity and find the answer. Why? Because when we talk about ideas, attention, no distraction, and the curiosity, these are the real essence and ingredients of creating a beautiful character, and that beautiful character make the society beautiful. So we are really thankful to Nivid for giving us a lot of wisdom, and I'm sure this episode will enrich teenager, students, parents, friends, brother, sister, and this society. And thank you to everyone for watching Between the Line. Do not forget to subscribe, and do not forget to read Between the Lines. Thank you. Stay tuned.